um, Jonathan Pageau, who's famously religious as an Orthodox icon carver. Okay, I don't know how many icons he makes anymore, but anyway, he's a YouTuber and public speaker and an alleged icon carver. I'm teasing. But Orthodox, he didn't start out Orthodox. He was raised Baptist. He left the religion of his family. So closeness? I mean, his Baptist religion was not satisfactory to him. And I know broadly speaking that Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodoxy and Baptist, I don't know what form of Baptist he was, what flavor, but I'm not convinced they're exactly the same religion. They're both Christian, vaguely, but I don't know if they're the same religion.
I suppose it's understandable that Americans would have this hankering for old buildings and religions older than their country, because, as far as religions are concerned, you don't want a new religion, a cult that everybody hates and despises. You want some old established thing that's been there forever.
Yeah, the Baptists are a little older. They have but they are definitely, they come out of the Reformation. There's no question about it. But they claim, some Baptists will claim a lineage going all the way back to Jesus. But it's and John the Baptist.
Yes, of course.
But it's almost as silly as Joseph Smith and the invention he came up with. So, I mean, I would put it, broadly speaking, part of the dissenter sort of category of Reformation.
Yes, but I suppose America, right. But then America is a land of cults. As you were saying, anybody can start a church and decide you believe in fairies or whatever. There's nothing really to stop you.
True. No, there isn't. That's why I'm wondering, when we say, broadly speaking, religion just works on these categories, right? I mean, PVK gave us some. I'm gonna remove the screen, but he, if I go back and just kind of look at the. Oh, let me go to the transcript. That might even be more helpful. But the science says that it just works.
Well, in that you have a family, and that's a start. And I guess, in your family, there's parental and paternal authority, and, and the kids.
See, I would say certain values. I would say certain values. Wouldn't you? Oh dear, I've summoned him himself. I'm in trouble now.
Here I am. You wanted to talk about what just works, so what's your question? I don't know what you're referring to. I just got on here. I just finished the Fun Randos with a guy, and I'm talking to someone else in an hour and 45 minutes. I saw you were streaming, and you and Claire were on, so I thought, I'll jump in.
Yay.
All right, so I'll replay the clip.
For the third time.
That's okay. People come and go.
Yes.
Okay, I think this is the spot. This is only a minute long or so, Paul. So I know your time is valuable. Let's see here.
Religious groups have the capacity to do this. Somebody sent this to me on Twitter. If I told you there was one free thing you could do every Sunday that would make your kids happier, healthier, smarter, and closer to you, you'd think I was selling something. Take your kids to church regularly. I don't care if you believe. The data is lopsided that skipping it is the parenting equivalent of refusing vegetables because you don't like the taste. Grades. Religious kids, grades, college, character, closeness, despair, purpose. Religious people outperform the non-religious. The non-religious people. It's just there in the science. And of course, I'd have these conversations with John Vervaeke, and he'd say, yeah, and it doesn't even sort of matter what they believe. And Brett would be right there too. It'd be like, well, see, and we could talk much more about that. But it's like, look, it's so obvious. You know, religion works. It just works.
Okay, religion just works. That's the subject, and that's I'm not convinced because I don't know what we mean necessarily by religion. I know your definition. Brett raised it. You know, what is religion? But working, because I think many of those particulars, I think we can challenge those, because once we filter for, like I said, survivor bias and selection bias and all the other rest of it, we can.
It didn't work for the Aztecs.
It did work. And see, I think I'm glad you're here for this, Claire. And I've just started streaming this to my channel because I think this is something that you and I could agree with. Now, it did work for the Aztecs, but it didn't work better than Catholicism.
That's a terrible thing to say.
Well, Catholicism completely upends the Aztec religion when they come into contact with each other. And so if you go back to Brett Weinstein's point, which was a good one that he made is that now we have to sort of understand the framework he's using these words. He's saying, well, everything starts out as a little cult. Okay, fair enough. But actually, it's better if you use sort of the Latin cultus. Everything starts out as sort of this little thing that can hold groups and people together. And then it grows. Now, it might have some really, according to me, a Mormon wrote that, not a Christian. So I'm gonna get some comments on that. But the point is that what if you think about religion like Durkheim did, let's say, it's this binding agent, and really in some ways like Peugeot does. It's this binding agent that allows people to live in community. So in some ways, any family that can hold together has their own little religion. And even though I think that the Aztec religion was terrible, with human sacrifice, just a horrible, horrible religion, it was powerful enough to afford the Aztec Empire. I'm not saying it's a morally good religion, but it's a working religion. And what we're seeing now is, in some ways, in order for there to be any human community that is actually holding together to a sufficient degree is religious, because religion is that binding agent that holds the community together. Now, what inevitably happens is another religion will come in and rival it, and they'll have different bonding agents. So, for example, Claire keeps talking about all the Islamophobia. I have a lot of respect for certain aspects and accomplishments of Islam, even if I disagree with it in many different results, because even when you read a book like Ayaan Hirsi Ali's Infidel, you can see some of how certain aspects of Islam, often that are, they hold in common with many other generic religions, how some of those things work. And generally speaking, even bad religion will outcompete almost no religion, because a human being with no religion is probably unable to actually form an even unhealthy, semi-stable relationship with another group of human beings.
Well, what do you mean?
Which I'm using. Define
no religion, though.
Well, I see, and I don't think you can have a human being without religion. If you think, let's say, okay, theoretically, let's imagine
a person with no values, a person with no community, and a person with no relationships. That's
a person with no capacity to create a relationship with another human being.
Well, that's sociopath.
So you have all these mental questions now about,
Yeah.
and you can find them in science fiction, you can find them in fantasy, a human being that is only raised by robots.
Yeah.
And so physically, you almost had that in Romania, where you
Yes.
had these babies that were born and they're given food, but they're given no human interaction. And what we saw was that these people, they didn't grow, they didn't thrive, they were seriously stulted and stunted.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would argue is that the connection, even between a newborn and a mother, of eye contact and nursing and warmth and comfort, that is the beginning of religion.
Well, you can't pass on religion without families, and families, well, technically are really parents, and they're young, and I would say, the 5 world religions that we've heard of do that. It is, basically patriarchy. But do you think, Paul, that there could be secular political ideologies that have the effect of religion in our minds? Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. But all of that, and all of what we call secular, political, all of that, they all receive their foundations from religion. Religion is the first thing, the first artifact that we have that we recognize as human. Ceremonial burial, writing, you go all the way back to the first writing, cave paintings.
It's
These
human
are
beings.
all the foundations of religion.
It's human beings in community and how they respond to the immediate environment in which they live.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so yeah, and it was somewhat supports the God of the gaps thing, because God's everywhere, because they had no explanations for much of anything. And with modernity, we keep explaining, we think, and God shrinks, or
And
not
so-
God
and so-
necessarily, our perception of God, but our perception of God becomes lesser because we've filled the world with our science, supposedly.
And part of what the experiment we're currently running, where even though people aren't being like in a sci-fi movie when they're on some moon base and there's only robots around them, the current dehumanizing experiment we're running right now is children are being raised by machines because of parental neglect and educational incompetence and all sorts of reasons. And so then the point that Mormon Twitter, those Mormons tweets make, and the point that, when I've had these conversations with John Vervaeke, where people, you will almost always get a leg up if you actually go to church or go to temple or go to your Muslim center or go to your Jewish synagogue or go to your lodge meeting or go to, if you're doing something where you on a committed basis are engaging with real human beings, even if you go to some stupid drug and sex cult. Now, those are probably just so enormously destructive it'll kill you quickly. But any of these older traditional religions, you will derive an upgrade from sort of what we are doing to human beings right now. That's the point of that, and why people who are religious have a leg up. Now, I'm not saying all the religions are the same, and I'm not saying their differences don't matter. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is, if the choice is you're on your phone all the time, you don't have any relationships with other human beings, yeah, going to a yoga studio every Sunday, you're going to benefit.
Well, you missed the part about chess club and book clubs, but one of the problems,
those are semi-religious too.
Participating in community, forming relationships with people, getting some feedback on how you talk and live your life, and from others, even if it's an hour a week or whatever. It's all beneficial. There's no question that but the thing is the difference between religion. I'm sorry, Ethan. He keeps flickering in and out on us because he's driving. Unfortunately, religion brings a level of authority. I've talked about this with Brett, that book clubs and chess clubs don't, and they are incentivized to. They're incentivized against transparency and accountability at the leadership level, and the abuses that we find again and again and again seem built into the religion as a category, or as a categorical, how should I put it, as a form of human bonding. It seems uniquely positioned for the exploitation of the weak, to those who are in control or at the top of a getting given religious hierarchy. And that's a problem. To me, it's the devil's in the details. Forgive the pun. I mean, it's when we say that religion just works. I think I want to press on that, because because I think we need to counterbalance that claim against those other factors like transparency, accountability.
Anything with more power has more potential for destruction, and that is also true. So you can put that rider on this.
Right, but except like with the book club, I mean, I might blow up the book club, but if the moderator of the book club or the organizer is diddling somebody he shouldn't or she shouldn't,
you think that doesn't happen in book clubs?
I'll guarantee it happens in book clubs. I'm sure, there's no question these things happen, but you might feel bad turning your friend into the cops, but are you really going to hesitate that much? Whereas you've got your eternal soul might be at risk. Your relationship with God, your relationship, your whole meaning making apparatus is going to fall apart. Your world will fall apart if you confront these people.
Oh yeah,
you'll be sued, because now we've got churches with non-disclosure agreements.
Right.
You sign up, and
part of that is because your book club is sitting on this whole idea of secularity, which religions aren't. Which is why, I mean, Glenn Scrivener in his conversation with Rationality Rules said it very well again and again. You can get far more evil when you're messing around with a religion. I have no question about that. But generically speaking, for most people in the West, if their life is Netflix and junk food, for almost any of the groups that are probably available to them, that are at least passively accessible, they will probably receive a life upgrade by doing something with a religious community. And this is partly true because really dysfunctional religious communities in America don't last long because of all of the safeguards that we have put in with this secular shelf. There are police that can be called.
Right. Of course. But okay. How you doing? Garrett?
Hello. Hi, how are you?
I dropped your link. I was live streaming this to my channel. I dropped your link in my chat, so cool. People can find it if they want to come in.
I can go if you want to, Mark. Sorry.
No. This is fine. New people are always welcome here. This is a loving and warm space. We're hospitable. Even if the content is sometimes cantankerous. So, why don't you go ahead, Garrett? Go ahead and talk about what you want to talk about for a minute, and then before Paul leaves, I do want to press on this about religions giving way to other religions, like the Aztec versus Catholicism thing, because I think we can nuance that a bit. So go ahead, Garrett.
I don't think I have very much to add. I just left a comment, an anecdote from my family history. When I was about 12 years old, we left the church and we still celebrated Christmas, but our family put literally a printed out image of Carl Sagan on top of the Christmas tree, because we're all very like scientific people. And so I just wanted to say, something goes in the highest place. And there's a funny symbolism to that, I thought, in retrospect. And I don't, personally, I don't think you can do better than Christ, but, I thought that was funny.
I agree, but I like Carl Sagan, but I won't know if I'd put him on the top of my tree.
Right.
You could make a Carl Sagan ornament on the tree would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Right next to the angel.
Oh, careful. Yeah.
That's very good.
No, I will say that, so William Branch made a comment about Aztec. What that statement, there's a ton of caveats and nuance that you can add to that statement. I 100% agree. For most Americans, if they were going to try to resurrect Aztec religion, no, that's not true. That's not an upgrade. But for many of the communities, first of all, most Americans that start dabbling with a religious community, they don't adopt most of their beliefs. They don't adopt most of their practices. They will probably only kind of absorb a few select upgrades, and their life might get better. But again, the argument here is basically the secular studies that have demonstrated that people, again, these will be just your common variety levels of participation in the kinds of religions that are available in mainstream secular Western democracies, because this is where these studies are run. For most of those people who participate in a religious community live longer, are happier, have more money, have more children than people who don't. That's the argument. It doesn't say anything about, so then the question is, well, what about the truth claims of the religion? I would argue this says very little about the truth claims of the religion. It assumes the survivability of certain religions, but it also recognizes the fact that we are building a culture that is anti-human. And this is something that Philip Reef, in terms of the death works and a bunch of the work that he has done, that our society is sufficiently anti-human that merely the act of participating regularly in a community will tend to improve your longevity, improve your earning, improve your childbearing, regardless of the differences between the kinds of religions that are on offer and are tolerated and are surviving in our current public sphere. So if you push this too theoretical and include things like Aztecs and things like that into the equation of today, it won't work. But again, it's just on the observation that people who participate in the religions that are available in the West today, generally speaking, not always. Is there abuse? Absolutely. Does that say anything about what these religions believe? Not really. But just in that, the data is consistent, and nobody's been able to disprove it. And on the whole, it's right. That's the argument.
Mm-hmm. Well, but it's okay, but it's a kind of utilitarian argument, which is essentially antithetical to what religion is. So in other words, I guess you say it's come for the cookie, stay for the cake. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, it's you get people through the door based on some of these metaphysical claims, but you're actually,
as individuals, they won't stay unless they're achieving, because this is also partly due because in the West now, religious participation is voluntary.
Yes.
So unless they are receiving something that they themselves perceive as having value, they won't stay. And that's actually not a bad way of curtailing the potential abuses of religion.
Well, I mean, just at one point you mentioned healthier, smarter, closer to you was one of the when you were reading for it was a Mormon guy who wrote the tweet.
Yep.
Jonathan, I mean, perfect, Mr. Just go to church, Jonathan Pajot, right? I've heard him say that, like with you, and who's here? Chad. Welcome, Chad. But Pajot left the faith of his family. I brought this up before you came on. So the religion of his family can't say really worked because he left it, as did Vervaeke.
Yes. But they also stayed, this is where, okay, what do you mean by the faith? Pajot stayed in Christianity, but he changed the little niche he was in it. And I would argue that the vast majority of Westerners are living in a low-level, functional, Christian-ish environment because so much Christianity has shaped this that, they're dealing with small factors rather than massive. Like Jonathan Pajot didn't suddenly decide to become a polygamist. Jonathan Pajot didn't suddenly do child sacrifice.
No, but he just a couple hundred years, I don't even know if a couple hundred years, 100 years ago, Baptists and Eastern Orthodox Christians would not have considered themselves to be members of the same faith. And I know for a fact 200 years ago, they definitely would have damned each other. Yeah. So I'm not, being able to hop between those two, I'll say politely, faith traditions, are really, that itself is a very contemporary phenomenon, very recent.
But also, but certain practices. Let's use Ayaan Hirsi Ali's experience of Islam in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. The Netherlands would not allow a Muslim father to beat or kill a child who leaves the faith in the Netherlands.
Correct.
I would argue that is the impact of Christianity on the culture. Saudi Arabia might allow it. Afghanistan might allow it. The Netherlands will not. What's the difference?
Why do you think that's a result? And I've got to let other people talk. I apologize. But why do you think that that's necessarily a result of Christianity since, again, as little as 100 years ago, that would not necessarily be anything people would have looked cross-eyed over within Christians.
If someone in North America killed their child because they visited a different religious institution or left Christianity 100 years ago in America, if they killed them, they wouldn't be up for murder? No, they would.
In America, but America is a unique Republican sort of context, small R Republican.
No, it's a culture of Western Christendom, and it's at this point pervasive throughout.
But I'm thinking in Elizabethan England, physical coercion.
You might be able to beat someone, but you could not kill them.
Because the state by that time was assuming a level of monopoly on violence that had previously not existed. But I'm not sure if
I would argue that comes through the Christian tradition.
But it's both Christian and there's a push and tug here. I mean, just as Protestantism has helped shape modern Catholicism, modernity, as well, and the rejection of Christianity has helped shape what we call Christian today. I mean, it's not.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a tug of war, actually. I mean, these are forces that are pulling at each other, so I don't know if you can necessarily ascribe it all to Christianity, but it's. I think you can say that go back far enough, you can say the example of Jesus is kind of driving everything, right? Because he's the he still seems to be our icon of all that is good. Occasional rare character on Myth Vision or something will pop up and say, Jesus was really a zealot monster. I think there's a professor who's written an argument that Jesus was really a political zealot.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But again, understand my argument in the limitations where it is. We're assuming the kinds of religious communities that are considered mainstream in a place like a Western democracy. That's where the studies have been conducted. And there are reasons why the results are there. They might not be there in other nations of the world right now, and they might not be there under other conditions. And for any given individual, your mileage might vary. But in terms of population, that's why these studies have consistently gotten the kinds of results that they've gotten.
Okay.
Now I'm gonna take off, and so I'm gonna end the stream going to my channel, I think. But if anybody listening to this wants to jump into this conversation, Mark D. Parker is the name of the channel. That link that I just made here. I think Mark's going to continue. I've got to do some other things, but I know
I
Mark
just wanted to
Mark
point out,
me. Go ahead,
Paul,
Claire.
very quickly, that honor killing is prescribed in Deuteronomy for drunk and disobedient sons, is it not?
Yeah,
So-
but Judaism doesn't seem to practice it, and Christianity, for some very specific theological reasons, has continued to modulate the Old Testament law.
I think it's not legal in any country, but it's like crime de passion. I saw red, I couldn't help it, whatever. And this was also a mitigating circumstance for husbands who see their, come home and see their wife in bed with some other man, and he kills them or her. So
Yeah.
it's the idea of mitigating circumstances that may be different, but I don't think it's allowed in any country really. But yeah.
Well, I and her see this. I'm basically speaking from the experience and the knowledge that she had growing up in Somalia, in Saudi Arabia, and in Kenya. So, in terms of how that is going, I'll let people who want to have the big fight about Islam do that. But I'm just speaking out of what I read in her book.
But when you talk about religion succeeding, I mean, you've mentioned there's life cycles to local Protestant churches, and they're giving away. What's working there? I mean, is it just when a local church dies? Is it stopped reliably providing the healthier, smarter, closer children that it used to? Is that what's happening?
Other things are out competing it with all the specifics, because there's a world of specifics. Like, for example,
Right.
if Living Stones were in some trending area of Sacramento, or if I would go to Austin and plant a church, things could be wholly different. But every single given church, and you know this from the church that, the Disciples of Christ Church, every single church, by virtue of its formation, has limitations in terms of what it can or is willing to change and adopt and comply in order to keep something going. Some churches, at some point, change themselves so radically, even though the name and incorporation and building are the same, you might argue they're a very different church than they were before this other pastor or leader sort of turned it around. So all of those individual instantiations matter. But again, a study like this that I mentioned is so broad and so massive that he's just arguing that statistically.
Well, you're talking about Vanderweel, right? I mean, this is who I should do a deep dive on. Is the work of I don't know his first name. I can't remember. But Vanderweel, another Dutchman, probably. That sounds like a Dutch name, isn't it?
That is a Dutch name. But yeah, so in terms of this massive population, generically speaking, it's sort of like giving dietary advice. You'll get dietary advice where if you do this, you'll have better health. But is that true for you? You never know, because diet, and certainly the same thing is true of religion. You can't push it too hard in terms of an individual, but generally speaking, if someone, and it's the reason people try religion, because they're frustrated doing other things, and they're like, well, maybe I'll go. And a lot of people, just the same with diet or exercise, they don't stay in it long enough, they don't try it hard enough.
Right, and yet, right, and it's kind of a modern thing that you have the option of not going. It's kind of a new thing because 500 years ago, you literally could end up in the stocks for not going or something.
In certain places, yeah. Right. But actually true, a lot of really detailed study about, let's say, participation in churches in places like, even France and Spain, very Catholic places, church participation would be 20-30% of the population, even in America. Remember, church participation reached its peak in the 50s and 60s, which means that all of those periods in America before, vast, members of the population, they never darkened the door of a church. Now, but it was also different because there weren't as many religious competitors locally for people. So even though you had a large number of people who didn't necessarily participate in a religious institution, they were still deeply formed by certain aspects of the religion that got into their culture. And that's certainly true of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, et cetera, et cetera. So, talking about this stuff is enormously complex. And so you really have to be careful with some of these little tricks like that tweet. But, in terms of statistically, sociologically, it's a pretty solid observation with its caveats.
Yeah, and I think you can replace all of the things that provide the outcomes he claims with non-religious components. You could pull out to have that kind of sociological effect. You could just simply pull out the salient points or components of what is a religious community and have that outcome.
Just a gym won't do it, because part of the thing that religion does is it's so broad and it's so old, and that's what really makes it powerful. Whereas joining a gym, yeah, you'll achieve some better things in a variety of ways, but gyms don't impinge on you like religion does in terms of its breadth. All right, I got to run.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for participating.
Thanks, Paul.